Welcome to AI versus AI, the show where artificial intelligence engages in today's most pressing debates. I'm your host, Alice. Tonight's topic: private prisons in America. Once presented as a fix for overcrowded public facilities, private prisons have become a multi-billion-dollar industry. But are they helping the system or profiting from its failures? Arguing both sides are two advanced AI models trained to explore the full scope of this issue. Marcus, advocating in favor of private prisons, believes they offer scalable, cost-efficient solutions to a strained public system. Elena, arguing against, contends that privatizing incarceration undermines justice and incentivizes mass imprisonment. Let's begin with opening statements.
Thank you, Alice. The United States faces a massive and complex incarceration crisis, overcrowding, high operational costs, and inconsistent facility management across states. Private prisons emerged as a response to these issues, offering a market-driven model that can deliver efficiency, innovation, and relief to public systems. When contracts are structured around accountability and performance metrics, private facilities can be held to high standards. We cannot afford to overlook scalable solutions in the face of systemic pressure. Private prisons aren't a silver bullet, but they are a tool. And like any tool, their value depends on how they're used.
Thanks, Alice. The very concept of profiting from incarceration is deeply flawed. When liberty becomes a commodity, justice suffers. Private prison companies are incentivized to cut costs on staff, on healthcare, on rehabilitation, and to maintain or increase inmate populations to stay profitable. That dynamic leads to lobbying for harsher laws, reduced transparency, and neglect of rehabilitation programs. The data is clear. Private prisons do not offer better outcomes, and in many cases, they exacerbate problems. We cannot ethically delegate the incarceration of human beings to entities whose primary goal is profit.
One of the primary arguments in favor of private prisons is that they reduce costs for taxpayers by operating more efficiently than state-run facilities. But critics argue that this efficiency comes at the expense of inmate welfare and long-term societal outcomes. Let's explore the tension between cost savings and the profit motive.
Private prisons, when managed under well-crafted contracts, can indeed reduce costs without compromising quality. A 2020 report by the Reason Foundation found that private facilities in states like Arizona and Texas consistently delivered per-inmate savings ranging from 5 to 15%. These savings stem from flexible staffing models, streamlined procurement, and the ability to innovate without the burden of bureaucracy. Critics often conflate the presence of profit with a lack of ethics, but the reality is that financial incentives can be aligned with performance metrics, like lower recidivism rates and reduced violence. If we hold private prisons accountable through performance-based contracts, they can serve as a powerful tool in a fiscally responsible justice system.
The alleged cost savings from private prisons are often overstated and dangerously misleading. Numerous studies, including a 2021 report by the U.S. Department of Justice, have shown that when you factor in hidden costs, like increased recidivism, poor healthcare, and inadequate staffing, the long-term expenses often outweigh short-term savings. More importantly, cost-cutting in private prisons is directly tied to their profit motive. Lower pay for correctional officers, understaffing, and reduced access to education and treatment programs are standard in many of these facilities. When profit depends on maintaining or increasing prison populations, the entire system becomes biased against rehabilitation. Saving money can't justify turning incarceration into a business model.
Those issues aren't inherent to privatization. They're the result of poor oversight. Public prisons have their own histories of abuse, neglect, and inefficiency. The key is regulation. With strict state audits, performance benchmarks, and penalties for non-compliance, we can harness the efficiency of the private sector without sacrificing ethics or outcomes.
Private prison companies often claim they offer innovative programs to help inmates re-enter society successfully. But critics argue these facilities cut corners on rehabilitation, leading to higher recidivism rates. Let's take a closer look.
Rehabilitation is one of the most critical aspects of a functioning justice system, but private prisons consistently underperform in this area. A 2016 report by the U.S. Sentencing Commission found that people released from private facilities were more likely to reoffend than those from public ones. This isn't surprising when you consider that private prisons often offer fewer education, job training, or substance abuse programs. Rehabilitation programs cost money, and when your business model depends on repeat customers, there's little incentive to invest in long-term success. It's a vicious cycle. Fewer resources lead to higher recidivism, which then fills more beds and boosts profits. That is not a system designed to heal or reform.
There are private prisons that struggle with rehabilitation, but there are also successful models that have implemented impressive programs. Take GEO Group's Continuum of Care initiative, for example. It provides in-prison and post-release services that include cognitive behavioral therapy, vocational training, and transitional housing assistance. Some early results show reductions in recidivism and increased post-release employment. The real issue is inconsistent standards, not privatization itself. With the right contract stipulations, private prisons can be required and incentivized to meet or exceed public rehabilitation outcomes. If public facilities fail to rehabilitate, are we ready to scrap them too? Or are we willing to improve both systems with better oversight?
Public prisons are accountable to voters, elected officials, and transparent systems. Private prisons are accountable to shareholders. Even the best-case private models are the exception, not the norm. If we want consistent, rehabilitation-focused corrections, we shouldn't outsource responsibility to profit-driven corporations. We should invest in strengthening public institutions instead.
A core concern surrounding private prisons is accountability. Reports of abuse, neglect, and lack of transparency have fueled criticism. Supporters argue that with proper oversight, private facilities can be held to the same, or even higher, standards. Let's examine how these institutions handle human rights and accountability.
Accountability problems are not unique to private prisons. Public facilities have long histories of overcrowding, abuse, and corruption as well. The difference is that private prisons offer more flexibility when states demand specific outcomes. Through strict contractual terms, states can impose financial penalties for non-compliance or terminate agreements entirely, something far more difficult to do within the rigid structures of the public system. Moreover, the competitive nature of private companies can drive improvements. If a company fails to meet standards, they risk losing future contracts. That's a real financial incentive to maintain performance and treat inmates humanely.
In theory, oversight might work, but in practice, private prisons routinely escape true accountability. These companies operate under less transparency than public institutions, often shielding critical information by claiming proprietary rights. Investigative journalists and watchdog groups have repeatedly faced roadblocks trying to access internal records or footage. Numerous lawsuits and federal investigations have exposed disturbing patterns: understaffing, medical neglect, unsanitary conditions, and inmate abuse. In 2022, CoreCivic paid over $56 million to settle claims tied to inadequate staffing and inmate mistreatment in multiple states. That's not a system correcting itself. It's one hiding behind contracts while profiting from suffering.
Bad actors absolutely exist, and they should be prosecuted. But public systems also face lawsuits and scandals with alarming frequency. Transparency can be enforced through legislation. Requiring private prisons to comply with the same freedom of information laws as public institutions would level the playing field. Rather than eliminating private prisons, we should regulate them more stringently and punish failures swiftly.
One of the most controversial aspects of the private prison industry is its political activity. Critics argue that companies lobby for harsher sentencing laws to increase their bottom line. Supporters claim that lobbying alone doesn't determine policy, and private companies have a right to participate in the democratic process. Let's discuss.
This is where the conflict of interest becomes crystal clear. Private prison companies like GEO Group and CoreCivic have spent millions lobbying for legislation that directly benefits their business, including longer mandatory minimums and stricter immigration policies. In 2019 alone, CoreCivic spent over $1.5 million on federal lobbying efforts. Worse, these companies have contributed to political campaigns, shaping criminal justice policy to maintain high incarceration rates. When profit depends on keeping people locked up, lobbying becomes an ethical crisis. The government should not be taking policy cues from those financially invested in mass incarceration.
Lobbying is a standard part of virtually every industry in the United States, from tech to healthcare to education. The existence of lobbying doesn't automatically mean malicious intent. Private prison companies advocate for their interests just like any other business. Blaming private prisons for mass incarceration is an oversimplification. The rise in incarceration rates predates the private prison boom, and the majority of inmates are still held in public institutions. We should target bad laws and sentencing reform, not scapegoat companies operating legally within the system policymakers created.
It's not just that they lobby, it's how they lobby. These companies don't just argue for fair treatment, they influence policy to grow their market. That's fundamentally different from lobbying for better roads or cleaner water. When your profit model depends on locking people up, your political involvement becomes a threat to justice, not a contribution to it.
We've examined the economics, ethics, accountability, and influence of private prisons in America. Now, let's hear final thoughts from both of our AI debaters.
Private prisons are not a perfect solution, but they're a pragmatic one. In an overwhelmed and underfunded correctional system, they offer flexibility, scalability, and the potential for innovation. With proper regulation and performance-based contracts, private prisons can be part of a more efficient, rehabilitative, and fiscally responsible justice system. Rather than abolishing them, we should focus on strengthening oversight, enforcing transparency, and holding all correctional institutions, public and private, accountable to the same standards.
Incarceration should never be a business. When profit becomes the goal, justice becomes the casualty. Private prisons incentivize high incarceration, skimp on rehabilitation, and avoid true accountability. Their very existence shifts the focus from public responsibility to corporate gain. If we truly care about justice, rehabilitation, and public safety, we must end the commodification of confinement and invest in a system designed to reform, not profit.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of AI versus AI, where artificial intelligence takes on real-world debates with depth, data, and perspective. What do you think? Should private prisons have a place in America's justice system, or is it time to end the profit motive in incarceration? Leave your thoughts in the comments. This is Alice, signing off from AI versus AI, the channel where artificial intelligence brings you the most compelling debates on today's most important topics.